Hey everyone, this is Austin Lee, your Bay Area real estate agent here on YouTube. And in today's video, I want to talk about one of the most important factors in the Bay Area real estate market, which is the school zone of your home. Now, why does this matter in the Bay Area real estate? Now, for one, not only does it affect your child's academic environment, like the type of school, the type of education they're getting, the facilities that they'll be entering about every day, but it also affects your lifestyle. It affects your safety, it affects your child's social circle, their professional network, and even your long-term home value. Now, because of the importance of schools, here in the Bay Area, real estate that is zoned to the best schools usually becomes one of the most expensive real estate in the Bay Area. So this is how the progression works. I'm going to talk about the general prevailing narrative that we have here in the Bay Area because now most families usually choose the top performing high schools because they think it's more likely that their child will be more academically prepared to not only get into a good college, but also thrive, right? Because if you go to a really competitive high school, it's going to prepare you well for college, right? Because generally these colleges also accept a lot of smart, hardworking students. So in essence, it's kind of thinking, hey, if I go to a top competitive high school, my student will be more prepared for that, big, rigorous college environment. And hence why here you see in the Bay Area that the school zones are actually driving the prices, even more than the cities. Like one example I could bring is the city of San Jose. Now, I mean, San Jose is a huge city, but so it's split into many different school zones. So depending on what part of San Jose, you can go to a completely different entire school district. So there's parts of San Jose that goes to the Cupertino school district, which is generally considered the more prestigious school district. And there's also parts of San Jose that may go to like East San Jose or a Campbell. And not to say those school districts aren't good, but they just don't perform well compared to the Cupertino high schools generally. So that's why, because of that, a house that is zoned in San Jose that's zoned to a Cupertino school is going to generally sell higher than a home in San Jose that's zoned to a lower performing school district. All right, however, interestingly enough, the San Francisco Chronicle has released some statistics of, how many of these students from these high schools are actually feeding into the UCs. Like, are these top schools from Cupertino, from let's say Palo Alto? Is it more likely that they'll actually get into the top schools such as UC Berkeley or UCLA? Or are there actually some diamonds in the rough? Are there maybe some schools that are traditionally maybe not as famous, not as popular, but they're also sending schools at maybe a similar rate to top UCs? So I really like this chart. I really thought this was really interesting. So you can see that this chart, you can see to all of the high schools here in the Bay Area. We're going to disregard the yellow schools because those are private schools. So we're going to look at the top high schools here, or really all the high schools actually here in California, and see, what's the percentage that they actually will get into a top school. Now, what I don't like about this is when you use admit rate because that artificially deflates the number. Because every high school has a different student body, right? Not every high school here in the Bay Area has the same amount of people, so the percentages are going to be a little off. So it doesn't mean like see Mission High, right? It's a 39% acceptance rate. Public school in San Francisco. I mean, that's really high, right? But it's only what 257 applicants, whereas like maybe a school in I don't know, Doja Valley, 210 is more people, but it's 13%. Does that mean everyone should be going to Mission High? Yeah, I don't, probably not, right? Because they probably have a lot lower applicant pool. So hence why their rates are a little bit different. So what I decided to do in this exercise, I decided to look at the student body of these respective schools and then divide that by the number of people that actually got accepted. So therefore, you get a better gauge of like what's the actual rate of you're likely to get into the school, right? Is it maybe 1 out of 20 students from this high school gets to UC Berkeley, or is it 1 out of 10 students get into UC Berkeley? So decided to do that percentage, thought that'd be a much better gauge versus this actual admission rate. All right, so for the first tier, I'm gonna go from like the traditional, the most famous schools that we have in the Bay Area, and that's like the Palo Alto High School, Gunn High School, Monte Vista High School in Cupertino, Mission San Jose High School in Fremont, Lynbrook High School in West San Jose, and Saratoga High School in Saratoga. So traditionally, these are like the more famous high schools. So that's why the single family home price, they're starting at 3 million. Generally, if you want a bigger, normal, even normal size, it's probably even $4 or even $5 million for a home that goes to these high schools. So you can see that from this chart, you can see about all these schools, about 100-ish in the past 3 years get into UC Berkeley. So it's about 30, 35 students. But you can also notice that the student body is also a listed student body. So Interesting thing about this data is Saratoga High School is about 1,200 students, where the rest of these high schools about 1,700, almost 2,000. But generally, you can see the percentage rate is about similar. Saratoga has maybe a little bit higher because of the smaller students' body. So look about 9, 10%, 8% here in Mission San Jose, and a whopping 13% in Saratoga High. So yeah, shout out Saratoga High. That's crazy. One out of what, seven students get into UC Berkeley? And that's pretty competitive, right? Compared to even Palo Alto gun, maybe it's one out of 10, which is, yeah, it's pretty, but still pretty good. So that gives you a good baseline. Um, a good high school in a good high school, generally one out of 10 students will get into UC Berkeley. All right, but how does this compare to maybe schools that are not as prestigious? Now, one area I'm noticing that people are starting to want to go is these, I say tier 1.5 schools because these schools are also, these homes that go to these schools are also really expensive, but they're slightly less competitive. So a lot of parents, they might not want their child to go to such a cutthroat, competitive academic environment because let's say, Palo Alto, Gun, Saratoga, a lot of these students, they're going to SAT classes. These families are generally very wealthy, so they're very financially strong. So they're able to support their child to make sure that their child can have a really strong, high school, college application. So that can kind of feel kind of toxic in a way to some parents. So they want their child to be maybe a little bit more well balanced, going to maybe a slightly lower performing school, which is not, it's not a bad school, it's slightly less competitive, or maybe people aren't as desperate to go into a really competitive high college. So this is like the Mountain View, Los Altos, Los Gatos, Carlmont High, which is in Belmont, Aragon High School, which is in San Mateo, Burlingame High, which is in Burlingame. So you can see these percentages. There is going to be a slight drop off. So the caliber of student does go down a little bit. You can see now it's about in the 5, 7, 5 to 7%, where earlier we were about the 8 to 12% range. But these homes are also really expensive, as you can see. I mean, 2.5 is really on the low end generally. You don't want to get into 3.5, even 4 for homes that map to these schools as well. But also the reason why these homes are also really popular is because they're also more along the peninsula, right? You can see Mountain View, Los Altos, Carmel, San Mateo, Aragon Highs, and Carmel and Belmont, Aragon High Schools in San Mateo. So there's a lot of tech companies along the peninsula as well. So this is why also these homes that map to these schools are also very expensive. Now, what's some other schools maybe some tier two schools that also maybe people want to check it? I'm thinking like Cupertino High, Homestead High, Wilcox and Santa Clara. Those are both in Santa Clara. Irvington High School's in Fremont, so that's kind of like the second tier behind Mission San Jose. And you also Leland in South San Jose and Milpitas High, which is also pretty close to Fremont. Now, so these schools are also still very well regarded. These are still really popular here in the Bay Area, but they're generally not as prestigious compared to like the Palo Alto, the Gun, the Saratoga, Cupertino, Monte Vista. But you can see actually in this rate, some of these percentages actually are pretty surprising because normally, historically, Cupertino High and Homestead, they were generally on that second tier in that Cupertino Union School District, I believe it's Fremont Union School District actually, but it's based in Cupertino. But you can see actually, surprisingly, Cupertino High has, I think it's even more than Lynbrook, 126 the past 3 years. I think Lynbrook's 105, which is Monte Vista's 140. And Cupertino High is 126. So it's even better at Lynbrook, actually, surprisingly. They've actually performed a little bit better. Homestead High has also been in that same district, was also considered a little bit lower, but 123. Now, notice the student body here is a little bit higher. So the percentage is going to be a bit lower compared to Lynbrook and Monte Vista, but it's also good to know that these schools that maybe not historically hasn't been as well regarded compared to Monte Vista or Lynbrook, that actually if your student goes, you have just as like good chance to get into UC Berkeley compared to those good schools. Right, good thing with Leland High too, right? Leland High is in South San Jose. That's historically, I mean, that's still one of a good school, but it hasn't historically been thought of like a top performing high school. But when you look at the percentage, 106, 15, 19, that's really just on par with a Lynbrook High School. Now, recent Leland High in South San Jose is also location wise, it is not as good compared to West San Jose, Cupertino, because it's more on the east side. So traffic going to the peninsula will be a little bit worse. So that's also another reason why you can see the single family home range goes quite a bit down. It goes 1.3 million. But I could also see these schools as, what's the 1.3 million? That's going to be able to be a lot more affordable to a general buyer pool. So, I wouldn't be surprised 5, 10 years, these percentages will be slowly going up and they could go on par as those tier one or tier 1.5 high schools. Now, obviously, 1.3 million is still, still pretty expensive. Even what 3, 4 million, that's even like not many people can afford homes in that area. So, does that mean that your child cannot go to a good school? So, I would beg to differ that I did find some high schools do have similar rates. Now, obviously, locations aren't going to be as nice as the locations as like Palo Alto, Saratoga, Los Gatos. But there are some high schools here in the Bay Area that if you really want a good education for your child, that you can get similar rates, right? So we have Dublin High in Dublin. You see about 118 students got in. Daughtry Valley in San Ramon in the East Bay. You also have Castro Valley High, which is, I guess, a little bit lower, but still 67 students. That's still pretty high relative to other high schools here in California. You also have Evergreen Valley High in East San Jose, Berkeley High, and Amador Valley High. So slightly lower percentage, obviously, compared to the top high schools, but the home price is going to be a lot cheaper, right? $1 million, right? You can see about 4 to 5%. So a slightly lower percentage, but not significantly lower percentage. But because of these homes that are mapped to these schools are in the East Bay, one trade-off is going to be the commute, right? There's not as many good jobs out in the East Bay compared to the peninsula. So that's one trade-off that you're going to have. But again, I do see there's going to be a lot of potential in this area. Now, one thing you notice about these schools are generally a lot newer compared to the schools in uh, the peninsula and the South Bay. You can see the student bodies are significantly higher, right? These are about the 2,000, even generally even 3,000, whereas the other ones are about in the low under 2,000, right? But generally here in these other areas where it's a newer area, there's a lot more space. And these cities, they generally like to combine, like have less schools for the entire city. So generally the whole city will be going to these schools. So student body to teacher ratio could be a little different, but overall it's going to be a lot cheaper compared to the Palo Altos, the Saratogas, the Cupertinos, the Mission San Jose. So I think that's just one thing to know about that. So I think it's just good to know that even though those high schools that are really expensive, that may not be attainable for everyone, but it doesn't mean that your child could still get a good education. That yeah, the trade-off will be maybe a little worse commute, but if you want your child to get into UC Berkeley that and get be prepared in a good academic environment, that's definitely still possible here in the Bay Area. So, all right, that's it for this video. If you like videos like this, that kind of like breaks down the data of what it really takes to get into a good UC, really shatter maybe the narratives that people often have. I really like to do this for my clients. Really like to go through the data because people often have these preconceived notions. What's a good home, what's a bad home, but oftentimes you have to look at the data, right? That's really what you should really use to guide your decisions. So. If you want like stuff like this, feel free to contact me. My contact link in the description below. Hopefully you found this helpful. Really see is a good school really worth it, right? And that's obviously going to be a little personal decision, but I think seeing these numbers will give you a little bit more clear picture, help you become a more educated buyer. So for more videos about what living in Bay Area is like, what more Bay Area real estate is like, feel free to check out more videos on my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.